Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. Coming to you from Seoul, I'm Yin Khvat. What connects South Korea and Taiwan? Behind me is the Taiwan mission in Korea. Lawmaker Cho Jun-hun tells me it's not just being power tech houses or democracies, but rather being in the same boat when it comes to China. In contrast to remarks from South Korea's president, the opposition lawmaker argues the fates of South Korea and Taiwan are interlinked, and as a result, the two countries must work more closely together. Today, we are joined by Cho Jun-hun, National Assembly of Korea member, Transition Korea Party co-founder. It's an honor to have you on Taiwan Talks today, lawmaker.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
So I want to start off because I understand that in South Korea, Lee Jae-myung, the new South Korean president, has been referred to as South Korea's Trump. and on a simplistic level, the reasons for that are that he's been controversial, he is populist, he was subject of an assassination attempt, same as Donald Trump. How useful is this comparison to understand Lee?
I'm not sure whether President Lee Jae-myung would appreciate being called Korea's Trump. And I am doubtful whether that analogy applies here, because two presidents have very different supporting background, and road to the presidency was also very different. Yes, they do share some commonalities.
So you mean that Lee came from a poorer background and Trump obviously came from a quite elite?
Not only that, President Lee become president from a supporter of progressive portion of the population, while Trump has gained support from the Republican conservative population. So controversy, yes, but I don't think the real Trump in US will appreciate this analogy.
Okay, now you visited Washington in January for Donald Trump's inauguration. Now that was 5 months obviously before Lee became president, but it was a month after your former president had declared martial law in South Korea. Just curious, what was the feeling in Washington at that time towards South Korea, towards Seoul?
For their invitation, I was part of the delegation from Korea to US inauguration ceremony, and had a discussion with some of the members of the Senate and Congress. And they do ask about what happened to Korea. We thought Korea is a very stable democratic country. Were we wrong about that assumption? I said, not really. Martial law was declared. Martial law is part of the presidential power according to our constitution. Of course, there's a legal case going on whether justification is sufficient for the president to call martial law at that time.
And I should remind the viewers that your party, People Power Party, obviously was the same former President Yoon's party. Can you help to explain the kinds of pressures that he felt that he was under at that time? I want to quote that he talked of the opposition as anti-state forces that sided with enemies in North Korea.
Since the election 2000 last year, or even before, Democratic Party has maintained strong majority of the party, and they probably has done, even they would agree, everything they want under the sun. To the extent that this former administration felt that there is not a single thing they can actually implement, even for those top priority agenda, which was discussed and agreed upon during the presidential election. So we have heard numerous times by former President Yoon that even though I'm an elected president, there's nothing I can do. And not only he was impeached eventually, before that there were about 30-something impeachment passed by the National Assembly led by the Democratic Party. Those impeachment include Prime Minister, Minister of Justice, and Supreme Audit Office, and also prosecutors that has been investigating the former, now the President Lee Jae-myung. So I am certain that exercise of the power by Democratic Party has been excessive. However, I don't support that justifies to call for martial law in 2024 of Korea. However, that has been the argument. And still, in our country, we have a divided opinion of that.
And what in particular was the siding with enemies in North Korea?
That is something that needs to be substantiated. There's a general perception that Democratic Party is very friendly, to say the least, with North Korea, while our party is taking a very strong position against North Korea. And we harshly criticized the previous Moon's administration's gestures and effort to make a peace agreement with North Korea without clearly clarifying who is responsible for the Korean War, which took place 75 years ago.
Okay. Now, moving to Taiwan, I'd like us to sort of analyze and compare the two democracies in terms of their political divisions and how these have emerged from the country's histories. So, in very blunt terms, Taiwan's divisions are pretty fundamental. They are becoming existential because those divisions are about how you see China within Taiwan. Is China the other? Is it a separate entity, country? Or is it the same entity as you? This is the division in Taiwan. For Korea, how can we characterize the division?
Yes, it looks like both countries have increasing number of similarities, including polarization of the society. It is with sad feeling that our Korea is becoming very polarized, politically and socially and economically. Whenever I visited Taiwan and had conversations with political and economic leaders of your society, I have the same feeling. At least from my side, probably we have not reached the level of existential. However, we have a clear true ideology struggling in every corner of the society. One is more conservative, market-based, traditional, power, strong foreign policy approach, who remember vividly the catastrophe, disaster of Korean War. On the other hand, more progressive, left-wing, combined with populism, that those groups who like to lead our country, bring our country into more experimental in terms of socially oriented capitalism and more dialogue and peaceful process of settlement with North Korea. And the influence of China. The Korean people have a mixed feeling. Not Taiwan, the influence of PRC. So politics reflects society. Of course, society reflects politics. It's a two-way communications. And I wouldn't know which calls which, but our politics and our society is very polarized. Reflecting that experience on Taiwan, I can only imagine how you feel about China. But my personal take on is, it's a system that makes a difference, not the blood. I don't define Korea by blood. I define South Korea against North Korea by our constitution, by the core value we stick to, the system we operate against North Koreans. I hope this is two words that I can share with my dear friends in Taiwan.
Okay, and you said that Koreans think of China in different ways. So very simply put, is it if you feel friendly towards North Korea, then you also feel friendly towards China, and then the opposite is true?
The presence of China, because the role of US to Korea is indispensable. The presence of the value of US in terms of defense, in terms of economy, in many other ways. So there's not much controversy over the role of US to the level that we host the largest US base outside of US territory. And there's no issue, significant issue as such. But when it comes to China, it is true we make money with our business with China. However, we feel that China, at least significant portion that I represent, feel that China does not respect Korea to the level that they should, and try to exercise, in many cases, undue influence on us. And new generations of Korean have no interest in accepting that. And when China looks down on us in some ways, our young generation has no tolerance at all. And there's nothing we should be ashamed of when it comes to China. Rather, we feel that we need to now stand strong to deal with China. I don't think we want to call China an enemy, but we have no appetite, interest at all to call China big brother. This is independent, democratic country. We believe our democratic system is superior to what they have in terms of political system of China. And even economic orientation, we have no interest in following their path. So I would call it this tension, increasing tension, or emotional tension, is coming from the fact that two countries, mainly China, does not pay due respect to their neighboring country. And I can imagine Taiwan even feel exponentially strongly about it.
In April 2023, former President Yoon angered China by this statement: the Taiwan Strait issue is a matter of international peace, not just a bilateral one between China and Taiwan. So does this represent the public view of your party, PPP, that essentially that Taiwan is a sovereign country and that it's highly important to the international community?
I do support that. And strategically speaking and realistically speaking, Taiwan is too close to the Korean Peninsula to be ignored. Internationally speaking, diplomatically speaking, sometimes it's easier to make friends when two countries are located far away because there's no security threat. We just need to exchange goods and services for the benefit of mutual benefit of both countries. It is difficult to maintain relationship I presume with China, because too close. And when it going back to Taiwan, Taiwan and Korea geographic locations not only similar, but also too close. Therefore, the fate of Taiwan inevitably will have a huge impact on the fate of Korean Peninsula. If one ignores this fact, that person is idiot.
So what do you make of Lee Jae-myung's comments about Taiwan recently?
Former President Yoon or Lee Jae-myung?
Lee Jae-myung.
Which was?
He said that South Korea shouldn't get involved in any Taiwan crisis. He said that South Korea should simply say "shishie" to China and "shishie" to Taiwan. He was asked by Time magazine whether South Korea would help defend Taiwan. He said he'll think about it when aliens invade Earth.
On behalf of those who disagree with him, I'd like to apologize to Taiwanese people. And that's very unwise comment. International relations, international diplomacy, international security is not operating in isolation. Before coming back to my own country and starting my career as a National Assembly member, I spent 15 plus years at World Bank International Community. I've had witnesses, cases after cases, that one country's fate is heavily influenced by the fate of the neighbors. You cannot live in isolation. No matter how narrowly you want to define your neighborhood, for Korea, Taiwan is included. There's no denial about it. The boundary of influence for China, for South Korea, include Taiwan. As much your boundary influence may include Korea. And we have to just accept it. Unless you can push Taiwan out to Europe or Latin America. Therefore, we have to think together. I dare to say Taiwan and Korea, Korean and Taiwan, not only in the same shoe, but in one shoe. When it comes to our security concerns, our national interest. Yes, there were days where strategic ambiguity may work, but these are not days of peace when it comes to international relations. China and US and China, probably next battleground after Russia-Ukraine war is over, after Middle East crisis is over. It will be over sooner or later, no doubt about it. The next battleground will be China and US. And Taiwan and Korea, like it or not, will be drawn into this struggle. And we should be ready.
At a recent wargaming in Taiwan, I spoke to Admiral Takei Tomohisa. He told me that without a doubt, if there was a Taiwan crisis, the Japanese would fight alongside the Americans, in spite of what many commentators have said, that the Japanese would simply protect Japan. And he pointed out that the 2015 Japanese security legislation, which expanded the role of Japanese self-defense forces, covers Taiwan. Quoting from that, it says, when an unarmed attack against a foreign country that is in close relationship with Japan occurs and as a result threatens Japan's survival and poses a clear danger to fundamentally overturn people's right to life, liberty, happiness. If a contingency was to arise, what sort of role would South Korea take?
I will be joining forces to advocate that we should actively monitoring and, if necessary, participate in resolving the crisis of Taiwan and China, the Cross Strait crisis, if that happened. I pray that it will not happen, but we should have all scenarios ready in our briefcase and do not hesitate to activate one if necessary. And non-action or strategic ambiguity is not the best option for the Korean society. I have to mention it, that I don't think there is a unanimous consensus among our policymakers and even society what specific action Korea should take. It probably will depend on many conditions, type of conflict, and the position of US, frankly speaking, the position of North Korea, and position of Japan. However, as I mentioned many times, we will not operate in isolation and ignore the Taiwan situation as if it doesn't happen.
Also in that recent wargaming, the US team set the Chinese team an ultimatum. They said that if the attack on Taiwan continued, that they would immediately recognize Taiwan. And this is because, as we know, US policy, One China policy, is based on peaceful resolution between China and Taiwan. And I know that you worked, while at the World Bank, you worked in Kosovo on the Kosovan independence process. How significant a deterrent do you think this could be against China?
It will make China to calculate carefully. There will be a price. Capacity to attack and capacity to retaliate are two different capacity, but equally important capacity. Therefore, it is important for China to realize and recognize that they will not play without judicial and serious thought into the way they handle Taiwan issue. I certainly hope that China will not use this tension to further provoke US. There will be a pity, very sad outcome of that. And
Do you think it would be effective? Because it's the one thing that China does not want, Taiwan to be recognized.
Itself may not be sufficient.
Because they're going for victory.
That in order to be a complete package, it should have some other elements. One should never underestimate the capacity of China. It should be supported by other elements to be a successful formula to eliminate the tension of Taiwan Strait. And what there will be is, that's a $1 million question. I'm not sure whether I should mention it in this public interview. But when I come back to Taiwan next time, I will talk to policymakers in private.
Okay. Maybe we'll get a chance later on then to talk about that. But in terms of the full package, in those war games, the Japanese ex-military officials said that they would also immediately join the US in recognizing Taiwan. So of course, this is the Kosovan moment. What do you believe South Korea would do?
I wouldn't be surprised if Japan immediately joined US in defending Taiwan.
In recognizing?
In recognizing even. Because it is aligned with their national interest. I can see that.
It's different for South Korea.
To me, personally, it is same for South Korea. But with the current leadership and administration in power, I'm not convinced, I'm not certain that this administration will take the same position as Japan, should that tension happens tomorrow. Therefore, as a friend to Taiwan, I think Taiwan and Korea should try and make an effort to closely tie our national interest further, going beyond military ties, strategic alliance, that Taiwan's interest should be perceived as Korea's interest and vice versa. And whenever I visit Taiwan, I feel there are many, many ways and areas that we can further our bilateral mutual interest and tie our hands even more closer.
Right. In many ways, Taiwan and South Korea are rivals, though. technology space in particular?
Yes. Sometimes rivals become friends. And in front of bigger enemies and threat, a wise man should shake hands, putting aside small differences. When it comes to issues like that, making more money and less money here and there is not as important as our security. Taiwan, Korea, and Japan are democratic island in Asia, isn't it? So three nations pretty much in the same boat, especially in front of China. So,
And we could add the Philippines.
and wise leaders, they should get together. And immediately I propose starting a conversation of strategic alliance. Because Taiwan, Japan, US together may be able to confront China.
We're going to have to end it there. Thank you so much, Lawmaker Zong Hun, for your time today on Taiwan Talks.